accessory structures in single-family zoning districts.
Mr. President, members of the board, on November 26, 2007, the Plan Commission adopted a resolution to evaluate the shore setbacks for accessory structures within single-family residential districts. Currently, principal structures within a single-family district shall be located 75 feet from the ordinary high water mark of a navigable waterway. However, Section 420-139B2D of the Village Zoning Ordinance allows this distance to be reduced to the average shore setback of the abutting principal structures on each side, but in no case shall that setback distance be reduced to less than 50 feet to the ordinary high water mark of the navigable waterway. Furthermore, one of the abutting lots to be used in the averaging setback is vacant. Then to calculate the average shore setback, the shore setback on the vacant lot shall be 75 feet. This provision would not apply when special conditions do exist. The proposed ordinance that you have before you, the amendment, would allow for required shore setback for a deck or a porch, including the associated steps or stairs, swimming pools, not including hot tubs, and or detached accessory garages, gardening, tool, or storage sheds and gazebos under 600 square feet located within a single-family residential district to be decreased in any shoreline jurisdictional area as follows. To the average of the existing shore setback distance of the abutting principal structures on each side, but in no case shall the setback distance be reduced to less than 50 feet. So what we're saying is the ordinance amendment would allow the averaging principle to be applied to accessory structures in addition to the principal structures, which is allowed by ordinance currently. In addition, the setback of the existing principal structure, provided that the structure was legally constructed. So again, we need to make sure that there is legal construction of the principal structure, then the accessory structure would be entitled to this averaging principle. This is, the slide shows just an example of how the averaging principle works. Again, if you have a vacant property on the side, and then you've got a house that's set back 45 feet on the other side, again, the averaging principle would apply, but again, no less than 50 feet could that be set back to the ordinary high water mark for the new house, as well as any accessory structures. So in this example, as shown in the slide, there's a home that was built in 1952, legal, non-conforming structure, but it has setbacks of 66 and 54. The area identified in yellow is an area where an accessory structure could be placed because the averaging principle would be applicable, but again, less than 50 feet. Could that accessory structure be located to the ordinary high water mark? I think there was a little bit of confusion at the Plan Commission that swimming pools and accessory structures, as accessory structures, don't have that 600-foot requirement tied to them. The accessory structure applies, the 600 feet applies to buildings, structures, gazebos, sheds, and so on and so forth.
Is there a setback from the primary structure then?
It's 75 feet to the ordinary high water mark, but the averaging principle can be used, so it can be 50 feet, insofar as there are homes or structures on either side. That
a setback from the primary structure
is 75 feet.
Accessory structure.
Oh, between the two? It varies depending on what it is. It could be 5 or 10 feet depending on what that accessory structure is.
But there is a minimum distance.
There is. Or it needs to be attached. For example, decks don't have to be set back from a principal structure because they're attached.
Mike?
If there's an area that has an identified floodplain, part of the floodplain.
Correct.
Okay, not necessarily the ordinary high water mark, but we would allow a building to go there regardless.
Correct. No structures will be allowed within 100-year floodplain, which includes the floodway or the flood fringe. Our zoning ordinance prohibits that.
One question, is there anywhere in the village, on any navigable waterway, whether it be Lake Michigan, a creek that we have that has a significant cliff or drop to the waterway, that waterway will never rise to the banks, to go to the banks of the creek or the lake?
Possibly in the very north end of Carroll Beach, UW.
Yeah, Barnes Creek.
And Barnes Creek, there's some substantial.
In other words, the water, as long as we have been here, has never, ever come over the top of these.
Well, even Carroll Beach, SewerPack would tell you that there's a long-term water level of Lake Michigan, that's a railroad tracks. So, long-term is a long time. But more likely that the bank sets off. And then when you start looking at that, you have to look at the soils, what kind of likelihood of that bank sloughing into the water. The Barnes Creek and North Bay UW are probably the best examples.
Yeah, what goes through my mind, and the reason I ask this is, you look at Milwaukee and you look at Chicago. Chicago River, the buildings are right up to the edge of the river, and Water Street the same way. Now, I don't know, maybe they got a different set of DNR rules up there, but you know, and they don't have a flooding problem. So I don't know how all that stuff is interpreted, and maybe it's a little bit beyond me, but when you have an area that I was referring to, that there will never be a chance, at least not normally, that water ever rises to the banks of that river, that waterway. Are we kind of pushing it a little bit, keeping somebody from maybe pushing a little bit closer to and utilizing their property a little better?
Your question is really unrelated to the ordinance?
What?
That's the horse. Is it just a separate question that you're looking for direction?
I guess I am, but you're talking 50 feet, but the average, no closer than 50 feet, right? That's the ordinance, that's what you're proposing.
Well, that's what it is today for principal structures,
Right.
and we're proposing that the same consideration be given to accessory structures.
To assess, but no closer.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is that if this property has a 20-foot drop to the waterway, we still have to hold that accessory structure to within 50 feet of that.
That's correct. I would have to do some research with the DNR to find out if there's any consideration with respect to bluff situations. We just have not had issue come up here in Pleasant Prairie.
I think that the public policy consideration is that that the public waters should be protected from development encroaching in on. And that's, in Wisconsin, that's different than it is in Illinois. And there you've got a lot of development where you do bring right up to the waterway, you tight sheet the waterway, you build right up to it. And that's happened in Milwaukee, but all throughout Wisconsin, I think President Steinberg sees people coming in through waterways across the state. They're challenging that, and it's just two different public policies. Where Wisconsin, the waterways are meant to be protected at all costs, and that 50-foot is that way of saying you're not going to get closer to 50 feet. You don't want to take the chance that those man-made improvements are going to end up in the waterway or somehow detract from it or make it operate inefficiently. So it runs up. It's not just in Pleasant Prairie, it runs all throughout the regulatory law that governs waterways in the state. So yeah, they are saying you're not going to use that for a building. You can use it to be on, put the picnic table out there, do whatever you want on the grass out there, but we don't want the building to be that close to the edge.
If I could also add, Trustee Serby, that floodplains are treated differently in some communities in Wisconsin. Our ordinance itself is much more restrictive than other communities' ordinances. Some communities do allow development in the flood fringe as long as the structure is flood-proofed. Our ordinance expressly prohibits a structure from being located within the flood fringe. And we have taken that position with us since our incorporation in 1989, and Kenosha County's had that same restriction since 1983. So with respect to floodplain, we are more restrictive than some other communities. But with respect to the shoreline jurisdiction and the ordinary high water mark, it is what Mike says it is for the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Did you give a motion? Look for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 08-10.
I will do second. A motion by Clyde, second by Steve. Further discussion?
Yeah, well, we use the 50 feet average, because it happened in Carroll Beach, by the lake, one of the piece of property, there was, somebody called me, one of the neighbors, it was in 2 points, and the average was below the 75 feet or less, actually 50 feet. And that's what we hear about. At one point was here, and the property was right here in the water. So it could not be 75 feet,